right, fantastic. Sorry, we had a couple technical issues there, but it looks like we're finally live. Welcome, everyone. A lot of interest today, lots of questions on Facebook and by email prior to this Facebook Live. It's 7:10 here in New Zealand on Wednesday morning. Welcome again. Thanks, Julia, and thank you, Charlotte, for making time. The reason for us being here today is that Immigration New Zealand is introducing a bill to Parliament to try and manage the consequences of the COVID-19 crisis and the lockdown in New Zealand. Immigration New Zealand services have been largely paused for the last few weeks. Some INZ staff has been able to work remotely onshore, but all offshore branches are closed, and a lot of the onshore staff is still unable to work. But the staff is slowly going back to work as we are further easing restrictions. But one would still expect a major backlog. So Julia, can you tell us a bit more about the announcement itself?
Yeah, sure. Well, like you said, Fabian, once INZ resume work, they're going to find themselves with a huge backlog of applications, and they're going to have to manage these efficiently. Normal visa processing times can sometimes be long, so they have to find a way to expedite pending applications.
Sure. And so what do you think will be the priorities? What is going to be tackled first?
Well, the Immigration Minister said that one of the practical challenges is to quickly manage visa changes for large numbers of migrants who are unable to leave New Zealand due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So he said the bill would offer pragmatic solutions.
Right, pragmatic solutions. What do you think this means, Charlotte?
So they've given us a few points of what they are planning. So basically they will be allowing themselves to impose, vary or cancel conditions for temporary visa holders. So what we're basically going to see is Immigration New Zealand is allowing themselves more flexibility. Every visa contains conditions, whether it's employment conditions, so it'll state which employer you can work for. It could be study conditions, so you are here in New Zealand to study, or the condition could be you're on a visitor visa and you can't work. So we understand they'll be looking to vary those conditions. So whether it allows work visa holders more flexibility to take up another form of employment, whether it allows student visas the ability to work full time, which we've already seen. They at the moment are allowed to apply for a variation of conditions to work full time in an essential service such as the supermarket, or even perhaps allowing visitor visa holders to work while they're here in New Zealand and fill some shortages which are in the market at the moment. We're also expecting them to be able to vary or cancel resident class visa conditions. So all resident visas as well have conditions for everyone. There's conditions on spending time in New Zealand. So they may vary that. They may vary Section 49 conditions. So, and that's conditions related to employment generally as well for most people. So, you know, they might take away the condition that they have to spend X amount of time in skilled employment as the labour market here changes. And they may change the first entry date on a resident visa. So if someone's offshore and they're granted residence, typically they are allowed 12 months to enter and validate that visa. But obviously with international border closures at the moment, we may see a change in that condition as well to perhaps allow more time, or also allow them to change that date, or they might remove the date completely. They are also allowed.
That would ease a lot of people's concerns in that respect, whether temporary or resident visa holders who are worried about the activation date.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a lot of clients offshore at the moment who had visas granted prior to border closures and had full intention of arriving after those border closures, but haven't been able to do so. So yeah, it could allow a variance in those dates as well, which is what we are hoping. Goes to Parliament today and will be put in place on Friday. It'll become law. So after that, we will start to actually see policies around what exactly they are doing. The third one to touch on is they will extend the expiry dates of visas. So that could be first entry dates, or it could be those who are already in New Zealand on visitor visas or work visas or student visas. If they are due to expire within a certain period of time, they could automatically extend that. And we have already seen that happen, visas expiring between April and June, and they were automatically extended through till September.
Right, so it's just putting a legal framework around something they've already done.
Pretty much. Immigration New Zealand had to do a lot very quickly to react to the situation, things they wouldn't normally do and things that weren't necessarily in policy. So they're now allowing themselves the ability to write that emergency policy and put it into place.
Great. So that's for people who already hold a New Zealand visa. Are there measures for people wanting to apply for a visa, Julia?
Yeah, I think the remainder of the points that have been announced kind of affect all of those people that want to apply for visas. So there'll be the ability to grant visas to individuals and classes of people in the absence of an application. We're not too sure quite how that one's going to be implemented. So I'll be quite interested to see what that one is actually all about. And they're going to have the ability to waive any regulatory requirements for certain classes of application, which will potentially allow INZ to change the lodgement requirements of a certain visa category. They're also going to waive the requirements to obtain a transit visa for those that need to come through New Zealand to move on to another country. Suspending the ability to make applications for visas or submit expressions of interest in applying for visas by classes of people. Now that's an interesting one that we'll keep a close eye on, because it would prevent certain classes of people from making an application, which is only going to be done on a temporary basis. Yeah, we're monitoring that one. And I think it's mainly to help INZ catch up with the backlog that they're going to face when they actually return to work. They also have the ability to revoke the entry permissions of people who arrive either on private aircraft or marine vessels. And that's just meant to align with the current restrictions for people who arrive on commercial flights who can already be refused entry if suspected of COVID-19. The decision-making framework that enables the minister or the cabinet to get around current operational bottlenecks. And this is a key point, because potentially a complete overhaul of INZ internal visa processes, or at least the decision-making process is to perhaps expedite certain types of application. And if it became more streamlined, it could help to clear that backlog and bring processing times to a more acceptable level. That's quite an interesting point for employers as well.
Right, okay. So we have a comment here on Facebook, essentially saying that will be the kiss of death on both sides of the equation. I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as this is implied, but should we really be concerned at all about these changes, Charlotte?
No. Immigration New Zealand and the government has stated that they are temporary measures. They are only in effect for 12 months. So in the scheme of things, it is quite a short period of time, but it's allowing them enough time to make sure we cover this COVID-19 pandemic thoroughly. They've said it's being put in place for the benefit of migrants rather than the detriment. So it's allowing Immigration New Zealand powers to effectively help people in situations where they could be facing separation from family, or they're stuck in New Zealand. So they're wanting to actually help migrants rather than, stop migration. Important to remember, we still only have a population of 5 million people. So as our economy rebuilds, migrants are going to continue to be important to New Zealand. So that's not going to change. People shouldn't be scared that the door's been shut, so to speak.
So those special powers expire 12 months from becoming in effect, but they're not saying that you can't immigrate for the next 12 months, right?
No, not at all. No, you can still immigrate, and we are still encouraging people to, if immigrating to New Zealand is in their plans, then by all means start planning now. 2021 is not that far away, so it's a good time to start planning. And then as soon as those border restrictions lift, then you can start looking at actually moving to New Zealand again.
Right, so they're not likely to suspend new applications for work visas for people like carpenters or plumbers or anything like that?
Not that we can see, no. So, like I said, migrants will continue to be extremely important to our economy. A lot of the unemployment New Zealand is facing will come from the tourism, retail, and hospitality sectors. Those people still can't jump onto a building site and build a house, or go and fix someone's plumbing, or do some wiring, or build a road. So those skill shortages will still be there. So Immigration New Zealand will definitely still be looking to allow New Zealand employers to obtain the skills and the staff that they require.
Right, okay. So Julia, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, mentioned that immigration will not be possible for countries other than Australia for some time to come. That's what one of our Facebook commenters seemed to think. Is that the case, or is that more about creating a safe bubble between Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, I mean, Australia seems to be tracking on the same trajectory as New Zealand with the sort of squashing the spread of the virus, and she's looking at hopefully safely implementing a bubble around Australia and New Zealand to allow us to travel between the two countries, to try and reboot the tourism, basically. I mean, we're going into winter now. Our ski season is popular in New Zealand, and the Aussies like to come for ski season. So if that can be worked out and find a way to safely implement that bubble around the two countries, would be great. And then it can kind of be a model for the rest of the world to look at. This is what we need to do to lift border restrictions, to encourage, you know, the other countries to be allowed in.
Right. The way I understand it, that sort of Australia-New Zealand bubble is also about avoiding for travellers having to have a 2-week quarantine before and after flying. It's about loosening the travel restrictions between the two countries, isn't it?
Yeah, because that would be a huge thing to manage, and that's probably the biggest concern for New Zealand after working so hard on getting a handle on this virus. Yeah, and then to ask people that want to come here on holiday from overseas to then spend 2 weeks in quarantine when they arrive, and then 2 weeks in quarantine when they go back. Nobody can really afford to take a month off work to sit in a quarantine area. So there has to be a solution to that in the future. So that's probably a little way beyond the Australia-New Zealand bubble, but yeah, it's definitely something they're looking at.
Great. So Charlotte, we have a few questions right now on Facebook. People concerned because they applied for visas before the lockdown, or because their activation date has already lapsed. What can you tell us about this? Are these visas likely to be processed anytime soon, and can they reach out to INZ to extend the activation date?
So at the moment, probably the most common question I'm getting in my inbox every single day from a dozen families I personally have in that situation. The typical way that we would apply for a variation of conditions on those entry dates is a physical application. Obviously, these people are offshore. All the offshore branches and visa application centres are currently closed due to COVID-19 and immigration's response to that. So we are waiting for an online solution. Immigration has kind of played with the idea and said they may release an online solution, not situation. So we are waiting for that, and hopefully with this bill being put into place and becoming more on Friday, that's when we will start to see those special forms becoming available. So we are expecting leniency in this situation. We're not expecting immigration to say your entry conditions have expired, even though it's not your fault, you have to apply for a new visa. We are expecting them to say, okay, your entry conditions expired, however, apply for a variation of conditions and we will still grant it.
Right, fantastic. I see a few more questions trickling through, but these are starting to border on personal circumstances. So what we might do is just leave it at that for now, and we'll reply to your questions as a private messaging on Facebook, or you can reach out to us at info@newzealandshores.com. And if you've missed part of this webinar, it should be reposted as a recorded video shortly on Facebook. Thanks, Julia. Thank you, Charlotte. And we'll be in touch with everyone again as soon as we find out more. Thank you.
Thanks. See you later.